It's 7:14 on a Monday, and you're the third car in line at the Shell station on Route 12. The pump ticks past $34 for a half tank. Your Corolla has 188,000 miles on it, and a driver's door that only opens from the outside if you lift the handle twice. Behind you, a jacked-up Ram backs in at an angle that takes up a car and a half. The guy driving it sits 3 desks away from you at work. Devin. He nods. You nod back. Devin's truck payment is $740 a month. Your investment account passed $211,000 2 weeks ago. Nobody in this parking lot knows that, not even Devin. You could afford the truck. You've run the numbers, usually while waiting for a light to change, usually not on purpose. What you can't quite explain, not to Devin, not to your mother, not really to yourself, is why you don't want it. This isn't a story about being cheap. It's a story about what happens when you quietly stop needing the parking lot to know anything about you. You're 23, in a studio apartment with a futon you never bothered to fold back into a couch, $340 in checking, and a payday that's still 4 days out. Rent is $710. The insurance on the Corolla, already 9 years old, is $61. There's a warning light on the dash you've decided means nothing until it means something. Your uncle calls that Sunday. He doesn't ask about the job. He asks if you're saving anything. You say you will once things calm down. He says they don't calm down. You just stop noticing the chaos. You forget that sentence for almost 2 years. It resurfaces later, uninvited, the way things like that do. The next Monday, on your lunch break, you open a brokerage app you'd downloaded and ignored for 6 months. It takes 9 minutes. You put in $40, money that was earmarked for a haircut you keep skipping. 1 index fund. That's the entire event. No fireworks. Your apartment looks the same. The Corolla still makes the same noise starting up in the cold. But the following payday, you do it again. $40. Not a strategy yet. Barely a routine, just a number that leaves your account before you can argue with yourself about it. By the following winter, the balance is $580. You check it more than you'd admit out loud, not because it's growing fast, because it isn't, but because it's the only figure in your life that only ever moves one direction. There's a specific fatigue that comes with being broke in your 20s that never makes it into a movie. It's standing in the cereal aisle doing arithmetic under your breath. $5.29 for the good coffee versus $3.10 for the version that tastes like a wet cardboard box. You put the good coffee back. Nobody sees it happen. That's the part nobody puts in a highlight reel. Your friend, Alina, you won't meet her for another year and a half, tells you later she did the exact same calculation in a different grocery store in a different state that same winter. Being broke, it turns out, looks nearly identical no matter whose life it's happening to. You get a cost of living bump, $2,600 a year, delivered in an email titled Updated Compensation, the kind you read twice standing by the vending machine, coffee cooling in your hand. You do the unglamorous thing. You raise your contribution by the exact size of the raise before the money ever lands in checking. $65 a paycheck becomes $110. You never register the difference because you never let yourself see it in the first place. Devin gets a similar bump that spring. He leases a 2020 F-150 the following week. You don't think less of him for it. He's not careless. He works hard, and for years that truck makes him genuinely happy pulling into the lot every morning. This isn't a story where anyone is the villain. There's a woman named Cheryl in receivables, closing on retirement, who's worked there longer than you've had a driver's license. One Thursday, waiting on the same printer, she glances at your keychain, the Corolla fob, a gas station key tag, nothing else, and says, without much ceremony, the car doesn't know your net worth. Neither does anybody else unless you tell them. Then the printer finishes and she walks off with her stack of paper.
You think about that sentence for maybe 5 seconds before the day swallows it whole. It doesn't register as advice. It feels like a woman making an observation about a keychain. The account crosses $8,900 that fall, then $17,300 the following spring. None of it feels dramatic because putting $110 every 2 weeks into an index fund isn't dramatic. There's no ceremony, nobody throws you a party at $17,300. Nobody notices at all, which turns out to be the whole point of this stage, though you don't know that yet. By 26, the number sits at $31,000. The Corolla has a spider crack in the windshield from a rock on the highway that you've decided isn't worth fixing yet. Here's the part that happens entirely off-screen. That $17,300 was never really $17,300 that you deposited. Most of it is money that left before you could spend it. A smaller, slowly growing slice of it is money the market added on its own, quietly stacking on top of money that was already stacking. 2 years earlier, that growth was a rounding error. Now it's a real line on the statement next to your contributions, starting to look less like a footnote. At 29, the account crosses $100,000 on a random Sunday morning while you're still in bed, half asleep, scrolling before your alarm. You sit up, you look again. You expect to feel something enormous. You feel roughly what you felt at $31,000, maybe slightly more awake. That same week, as if timed to test you, 2 things happen 4 days apart. First, the market drops 8% over 10 trading days on rate hike fears. Your $100,000 becomes $93,000, then $89,900 before you make yourself stop refreshing the app. Devin asks, half-jokingly, if you're getting wrecked out there, the way people ask about things they've heard of but don't actually track. Second, the Corolla's transmission starts making a noise on cold mornings that you know somewhere in your gut means money. A coworker's cousin is selling a clean 2022 Tacoma low miles for $31,500. You sit in your car in the Shell parking lot, the same lot you'll be standing in years later, running numbers on your phone. Financed reasonably, it's about $560 a month. You can afford it easily. Nobody would question the decision. You don't buy it, not because trucks are irresponsible. Devin's hasn't wrecked his life. It's because you run one more number almost by accident. $560 a month invested instead at a historical average return becomes something in the neighborhood of $165,000 over 15 years. Not guaranteed, not a straight line, but the shape of it is enough. You keep the Corolla. The noise turns out to be a $65 sensor, not the transmission. You feel almost embarrassed at how relieved you are. The market recovers over the next 4 months on no particular schedule with no particular announcement. The account passes $100,000 again in the string and keeps climbing past it, like the dip happened to someone else's account entirely. At 32, something starts happening that has nothing to do with what you're putting in. You're still contributing $280 a paycheck. It's crept up twice, once after a promotion, once because you just decided to. But some months, the account grows by more than your salary could explain on its own. You do the math one night at the kitchen table, the same table from the old studio, just in a bigger apartment now. That year's contributions, $7,280. That year's growth, $26,400. The portfolio earned more than 3 times what you fed it. Not every year looks like that. You've read enough to know markets don't move in straight lines. But that year, the money worked harder than you did, and it never sat in traffic to get there. That winter, the water heater dies. $1,400 to replace, same-day cash. 3 years earlier, that number would have meant a credit card and a bad week. Now it means a transfer and an annoyed phone call about scheduling. The emergency stops feeling like an emergency. It just becomes an inconvenience with a receipt.
Tyler, someone you knew from your old building, sells real estate now and drives a leased Range Rover that turns more heads than Devin's truck ever has. He posts about closings. From the outside, he looks like the version of success you were told to chase at 23. You run into him at a cookout that summer, and somewhere between the second drink and the burgers, he mentions, almost casually, that a slow quarter nearly meant missing the lease payment. He laughs when he says it. You don't laugh. You just nod. It's not superiority you feel. It's closer to recognition, the understanding that two people can look completely different on paper and be standing on completely different ground, and nobody at that cookout could tell which one of you is which. At 34, your manager offers you a promotion, $8,400 more a year, a second location to run, 40 minutes further out, 2 Saturdays a month. 3 years earlier, you'd have said yes before he finished the sentence. Instead, you sit with it for 4 days, which surprises your manager more than your answer does. You turn it down. Not because the money doesn't matter, it does, and in some ways it matters more now because you understand exactly what it compounds into. You turn it down because the account, sitting at $398,000 that spring, is generating close to $22,000 a year on its own, and the 2 extra Saturdays are worth more to you than the raise. This is the part nobody warns you about. Freedom doesn't arrive as a lottery win. It shows up as an ordinary Tuesday where you say no to something perfectly reasonable for reasons that would have sounded ridiculous to you 5 years ago. Alina, now the person you've been with for 2 years, notices before you say anything. She's known you long enough to remember the version of you that flinched at a $50 dinner. One night, she asks, half joking, why you're still driving that same sad Corolla now that she knows the number, because you finally told her, on the couch, almost apologetically, like a confession. You tell her the car stopped being about money a while ago. Somewhere in the last decade, it turned into something closer to a boundary, proof that you get to decide what your life looks like, instead of your bank balance or someone else's opinion of it deciding for you. She doesn't fully get it that night. She gets it 3 months later when her hours are cut at the hospital, and for the first time in her adult life, she isn't afraid of her checking account, because yours can absorb the gap without either of you saying so twice. That's the kind of freedom nobody posts about. Not a beach, not a reveal video, just a Tuesday where a bad month doesn't turn into a crisis. At 36, the account crosses $650,000, and something shifts. You stop telling people things are going well because you notice some people can't quite hear it when you do. An old roommate from college resurfaces after years of silence, and the conversation is warm until money comes up. A layoff, a run of bad luck that isn't his fault. You help, quietly, with an amount that would have felt impossible at 23 and barely moves the account now. Something in the friendship shifts afterward anyway. He gets quieter. You get more careful about what you mention. Devin, still at the company, still driving a truck, a newer one now, asks one Friday, not unkindly, how you always seem so relaxed about money. You don't have a clean answer. You've thought about explaining 15 years of $40 and $65 and $110 leaving your accounts before you could talk yourself out of it, the Tacoma you didn't buy, the promotion you turned down. It sounds, even to you, like a story that needs more patience than a Friday afternoon allows.
There's a specific quiet that comes with the stage nobody mentions at the start. It isn't loneliness exactly. It's more like standing just outside a conversation you used to be fully inside, not because you changed how you talk to people, but because the math under your life stopped matching theirs. And math you can't say out loud is hard to stay close to people around. You think, more than once that year, about Cheryl and the keychain. The card doesn't know your net worth. Neither does anyone else unless you tell them. You understand now she wasn't talking about the car at all. It's 7:14 on a Monday, and you're at the Shell on Route 12 again. A different Monday, years later, watching the pump climb past $39 because gas got more expensive and you didn't. The Corolla is still the Corolla, louder now, more embarrassing to certain people, though those people have gotten easier not to think about. Devin isn't in the lot this particular morning, but somebody like him is, in a truck like his. You don't feel the old flicker of comparison you used to feel at 23, not because you've become a better person, but because the question that flicker used to ask, "Can I afford that?" got answered a long time ago and quietly stopped being interesting. Your account is worth more than most of the houses on the street you grew up on. Nobody at this gas station knows that, including the version of you standing here right now, who still just feels like someone getting gas before work. That's the whole contradiction the story was built on. You chose wealth over looking wealthy, and the strangest part is how invisible that choice turned out to be. No luxury car, no renovation, no announcement. Just a 15-year habit of $40 repeated until the math changed, then repeated a while longer after that, because by then it wasn't really a decision anymore, it was just who you'd become. The Corolla starts. You pull out of the shell and merge onto Route 12, toward a job you don't strictly need anymore, in a car nobody's impressed by, carrying a number that would surprise anyone who's ever glanced at you in a parking lot and made a quiet assumption. You don't correct them. You never do. If this made you think differently about the gap between looking wealthy and being wealthy, hit like and subscribe for more like it. Question for the comments: would you have bought the truck or kept the Corolla?